But you live in a time when it actually matters a lot what you do.
Oh, say, can you see?
You have the way to repair what ails the nation.
By the dawn's early light.
I do know that you were born at this moment for a reason.
What so proudly we hailed.
The commitment that this country needs of a great generation to save our land and return our country to the republic it can be again.
This is the most crucial movement in America, bar none.
And the sacrifices that he made this year, he's amazing. I'm very blessed.
And I would not have been able to do any of it without Erica. And that's the real truth. I'll tell you what. You are here as a grassroots response to the top-down revolution happening in this country. I want our Turning Point USA students to receive a round of applause. These are the freedom fighters of America.
The media said that Turning Point could never run a ground game. They weren't experienced. They didn't know Charlie, right?
This is the greatest generational realignment since Woodstock. This generation is the most conservative generation that we have seen in well over 50 years, and the numbers show it. What young people especially are screaming at is they say, give me a structure that I can live my life by. And especially with young men, more challenging of them, more saying, you know what, honestly, I'm not gonna talk down to you. Stop being a boy and become a man. You wanna learn what that means? Come to church and I'll tell you what it means to become a man. Because we have the greatest story ever told. What can I do to save the country? You answer that question every single day, because you are doing the work to save this beautiful republic. You are doing something that is bigger than you.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. Most important thing is my faith in my life.
I don't know about you guys, but that's a pretty sobering way for me to start the summit. So I knew Charlie Kirk. I met him when he was 19 years old, and I really primarily knew Charlie socially. We didn't do a lot of work together. Convention of States was at a Turning Point meeting in West Palm Beach, and so we did a little work there together. But the way I knew Charlie was I met him when he was 19 years old, and I go on a hunting trip every year in South Dakota, and I go pheasant hunting. And we had a mutual friend by the name of Foster Freese. Foster was an incredible philanthropist, a billionaire. And every year he would take us on a hunting trip and a fishing trip. And it would be a group of guys, mostly guys, Christian guys. And all Foster ever wanted was for us to fellowship with each other. And there was never an agenda, which is the most interesting way to conduct a meeting I've ever seen. And what he believed is he would curate these meetings and he would bring people together from all different walks of life. And he would bring people who were literally, construction workers. He would bring billionaire investors. He would bring governors and vice presidents and senators. He would bring incredible, amazing technology business people. He would bring people from entertainment and news. There was one of these that I met Tucker Carlson and Neil Patel, his partner. And at one of these, I met this kid who you saw at the very beginning of that video, Charlie Kirk. And Charlie was 19, and Foster had met Charlie and believed in him, and Foster was the first big donor to Turning Point. I think he gave him $1 million to get Turning Point started. And so I met this young kid on this hunting trip, and as you saw in the video, when you see him at first, he was kind of a young, awkward kid. I mean, I think he was very smart, and he had great ideas, and he had a vision for what he wanted to do, but he wasn't the Charlie Kirk that you and I watch on videos now, the guy that could debate anybody with humility and skill and dexterity and knowledge, both biblical and historical. He wasn't that kid yet. He was just a kid with a passion and an idea. And thank God Foster had this way of picking talent. And that's what he was doing. He was just picking talent all the time. And so that's where I met Charlie. And I hunted with Charlie through the years a bunch of times. One of my most poignant memories of Charlie, and I think it sort of tells you who Charlie was, we went on these trips, and one of the things you essentially do on these trips is you unplug, right? Because we would go for 3 days, 2.5 days of hunting, and you go out and you're out in the field. It's beautiful. It's South Dakota in the middle of nowhere on this beautiful farm, and you're hunting these beautiful birds, and there's beautiful hunting dogs. And so for me, when I go on these trips, like, I don't want to think about anything. Right? I'm not doing business. Everybody knows I'm out of the loop. My family knows I'm kind of out of the loop. I'll call them at night, but I'm just there to relax and to fellowship with fellow Christians and fellow warriors and to learn from all these people. And Charlie, I remember, this is probably, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, was on one of these trips with me. And I remember him saying to me when he first saw me, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. We got to go on the bus together. We got to go out on a hunt together." So we did. The entire time we were on the bus, Charlie was on the phone. The guy never stopped. We went out in the field, and you would walk through the field. If you've never seen the way people pheasant hunt on these farms, is you walk through a field, it's maybe 50, 75 yards wide, 6 guys abreast, and so you're walking through the field, and the dogs are out in front of you, and they're flushing birds, and everybody's shooting at the birds, and so, I'm there, and I'm doing my best shooting at the birds. I'm not a great hunter. And I look over, and Charlie's walking the outside of the field. There's always a cleanup guy on the outside of the field. He's on his phone. Like, the gun's over his shoulder, he's on his phone. One of the things that made Charlie so incredible is he just never stopped. I mean, he literally never stopped. I don't know how he did it. I mean, you could say it's because he was young. I know a lot of young people. I have kids that age. Nobody I know worked like Charlie Kirk worked. And I don't know if somewhere inside of him was a time clock. And he knew he didn't have that much time. I don't know if God put that inside of him. I don't know if he just sensed a time clock for the nation, that he was worried about what was happening in our nation, and he wanted to get as much done as he could. But it was definitely there, that burning passion, that inability to stop, that ability to get more done than most human beings could get done in a day. He had 48 hours in every day somehow. So that's one of my most poignant memories of Charlie. I've been talking to a lot of people who are a lot closer to Charlie than I was over the last week, since last Thursday when this happened. And one of the things that is very apparent in how incredible Charlie was is how many people he was actually friends with. And I don't mean how many people he was acquaintances with. And I didn't consider Charlie a friend. I wasn't that close with him. But I talked to a lot of people who were. I mean, when I say a lot of people, I mean dozens I've talked to, hundreds I'm hearing from, people who tell me that, "Oh, Charlie texted me every day." I'm like, how many people can you text every day? And literally, I know all these big donors and all these politicians like, "Yeah, Charlie would text me. He's like, hey, I'm walking into an event at Arizona State. I think I'm going to have like 2,000 students there. It's going to be great. Pray for me." Boom. And it would just text people. He was just this incredible connector. And when he connected with somebody, he was going to stay connected with those people. And that was another extraordinary thing about Charlie, just his ability to relate to people, all different kinds of people, kids who were unsure of themselves, adults who just wanted hope that maybe there was somebody young out there that could help the country head in the right direction. Lord knows all of us that are older, we're worried about that. And so Charlie just had this ability to connect with young people and give them direction and give them, as he talked about, give me a system to run in, rails to run on. Charlie could give people that, explain his worldview on that. And then for older folks, he gave them hope. Like, it's okay. There is a young and rising generation. When when Charlie was killed, they took something from us. In my lifetime, I'm 63 years old. That's the most extraordinary political event of my entire life. You know, I don't remember Kennedy assassinations or anything like that. So at 63 years old, that's the one. Like, I will remember where I was when I heard Charlie Kirk was shot. I was in a very weird place. I was, to be when you hear something like this, I was in a newsroom. So I was in Washington, D.C. There's a news organization run by a friend of mine called Just the News, John Solomon. And I was sitting in a conference room with John Solomon, and we were talking about some business stuff we were working on together. And one of the news guys ran in and said, Charlie Kirk's just been shot. Just hearing those words is just like, it's unbelievable. It's a surreal thing to hear that. And John got up and went running out, and he went out of the conference room into the newsroom, and I followed him out there, and I just kind of shadowed him for about the next 45 minutes. And I was flying home that evening from Washington, D.C., back to Austin. And so I stayed with him until I left, and I sat with him and I watched what a real news person does. John Solomon, in my opinion, is one of the greatest newsmen in modern America. The guy reports just the news. That's why it's called Just the News, right? And I watched him go into newsman mode, reporter mode. And he knew Charlie pretty well. And he had spoken at one of Charlie's events 2 weeks before. So he was pretty shaken. I know how shaken he was. And he sat down and they turned the cameras on, and he was on RAV, Real America's Voice, and it was just like wall to wall. And he was just on. And every time they would go to a commercial break, I watched him. He was on the phone with Pam Bondi. He was texting with Kash Patel. He was texting with other people inside the White House on White House staff. He was texting with other people and on the phone with other people or at the White House. And we were trying to get a status, right? Because if you guys were watching the news, I assume a lot of you were. We're hearing, mixed stuff. Charlie Kirk was dead. Then you heard Charlie Kirk's alive, and they got him in the hospital, and they're doing the best they can, and it's critical. And while he was on camera, I was standing just off to the side, and he handed me the phone, and I looked at it, and it was from one of his FBI contacts, and it said, he's dead. And I looked at John, and I was about to just completely lose it, and he turned to me and goes, I'm in newsman mode. I'll cry on the way home. And he went back to doing what he did, which I'm so blown away because I don't think that I could have done what he was doing, was just report the news. And then I got to watch what a real news guy did, which is he had the FBI telling him that Charlie was dead, and he wouldn't report it. And he wouldn't report it because he didn't have it from 3 sources. This is what real news looks like, not fake news, not clickbait news. And eventually he got it confirmed by 3 sources inside the White House, 2 at the FBI, and he went live with that. And they broke that story while I was standing there. So I had this very surreal experience of being sort of behind the news while all this stuff was going on. And then I went to the airport. And I don't know about you guys, I'm still in a state of shock. And so I went to the airport, and the first thing is, it's the stages of grief, and I was in complete denial. It's impossible that Charlie Kirk is dead. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit with my picture of the world. People don't get killed for doing what Charlie Kirk was doing, was just having discussions with people about things that people care about. And so it kind of shattered my world, and I went into the airport, and if you've been in Reagan National, I was in the Southwest Terminal. It's an old terminal. It's pretty crowded. It's circular. In the middle of the terminal is a bar. And there's a counter around this bar, and you can order food there. And I don't normally eat when I'm traveling, but I sat down at this bar, and I just didn't know what to do. I don't normally drink, and I ordered an old-fashioned, and I ordered a pizza, and I'm sitting at this bar just stunned. And the TVs there's a bunch of TVs, and they're all showing Charlie Kirk stuff, and the woman next to me said out loud, but to herself, she wasn't sitting with anybody. If you're sitting at this bar, you're literally shoulder to shoulder, and so I'm sitting at this bar, my iPad's up, she's sitting next to me, and she said, well, that's what happens when you say a bunch of horrible inflammatory stuff. And I freaking lost it. And I looked at this lady and I said, "You're the reason he's dead." I said, and she just like, her eyes bugged out of her head. And I said, "It's people like you that say stuff like that create this permission to go out and kill people like Charlie Kirk." And I said, "I will guarantee you, I will put any amount of money that you've never even watched Charlie Kirk. You don't know a damn thing about Charlie Kirk. You don't know anything he said. You've never seen him talk. You've never watched one of his videos. And you're just talking trash about a father and a husband and a great man and a great Christian who just got killed in cold blood, and you say it's okay. And you think it's okay to sit here in an airport and say that out loud. That's why Charlie Kirk is dead." And she started to defend herself. I said, "I'm not even interested in anything you have to say. Don't talk like that anymore." And I just turned away and went back to my meal. And it wasn't thoughtful. I didn't do it because I thought, oh, here's a chance for me to say something. It's just, I just reacted, honestly. And there was a part of me, I reflected afterwards as I was on the plane, wow, man, that was pretty hard. I mean, I try to be a Christian and I try to lead with my heart, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. And then honestly, my better self said, "Oh, no, hell no, you should have done that." So something has changed in America. And I think that what's changed for me, and I think it's changed for a lot of us, is that we know what time it is. And I think for a long time we've been kidding ourselves that there are these people in America that do all this crazy stuff, that protest, and maybe they tear down some statues, and occasionally they burn up some cities, and they're on MSNBC and they say a bunch of stupid, horrible stuff, and it's fine because people just have different opinions. That's not what time it is in America anymore. What time it is now we understand, we're very clear. If you're not very clear about this, I hope you will be very clear about this after I say this. They want us dead. They're okay with us being dead. And I watch what happened online, and I have to live online a lot more than I like. If I didn't do what I do for a living, I would throw my phone away. Social media is a cesspool. But I have to be out there because of what we do. And so I was exposed to so much toxic sludge, to all these people. I'm sure some of you have seen it. Most of you probably, people saying that they were joyous that Charlie Kirk was, people acting demonic, like literally demonic, like giggling, laughing, dancing, singing, celebrating that this incredible young man, this Christian, this father, this husband was murdered in cold blood. People are still celebrating today. And then my feed is full of this stuff. There was one guy I saw that made a comment from the left that I really appreciated, and it's a guy that I've known for a long time. I haven't talked to him in a long time. His name's Jake Uyghur, and he's on the Young Turks. Some of you probably know who he is. Crazy leftist guy, all right? But I've known him for probably 15 years, and we stay in touch on and off. And I've always known him to be what I would describe as an honest liberal. Today, that's kind of an oxymoron, but... And Jenk said, look, I'm willing to talk to anybody about this. I think what happened is horrible, unequivocally bad, and we should condemn it no matter what. And it was actually a pretty good statement for somebody from the left, pretty good statement for anybody. And so I texted Jenk, and I said, hey, I saw what you said. I appreciate what you said, and I'm reaching out. You said you're willing to talk to anybody. And he said, hey, I've always respected you, happy to have the conversation with you. And so we started first texting back and forth. And I think what both of us were doing was testing the water, right? I didn't really feel like getting on the phone with him because I didn't want to cuss him out, and probably would have. And so got on the phone with him, and we were texting back and forth, and I said, I really appreciate what you said, but you got to understand, like, your side is celebrating this. And he said, well, I think that's an overstatement. And I said, Jenk, I just sat here and watched 2 hours continuous, literally dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of videos of people on the left celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk. And he said, well, that's horrible. I condemn that. And then he said, but you have to admit that President Trump has caused some of this because he has authoritarian tendencies and he doesn't even listen to the courts. And I said, first of all, this is all text. And I said, first of all, Jenk, what does it even mean, authoritarian tendencies? Like, that's your opinion, but when you say that Trump is an authoritarian, what you're doing is you're giving people permission to kill him. Right? Because if he truly is an authoritarian president, and he said, well, I didn't say he's authoritarian, I said he has authoritarian tendencies. I'm like, and this is my reaction was your reaction, like, and in text, I'm like, seriously, are we really going to do that little semantic game? I'm like, so you say he's and I said, and you said he doesn't obey the courts. That's just a straight up lie. Like, name the case where Donald Trump didn't obey the court when it ruled against him. Of course, you know what came back? Nothing. Because there isn't a case. And I said to him, you know, Donald Trump has actually said openly, words out of his own mouth. It's Donald Trump, he said, I will follow the courts. What the courts say is what I will respect and I will do. And he goes, well, he hasn't defied the courts yet. I won't put the expletives in the sentence that I responded with, but I said, you got to be kidding me. Like, literally, this is what you're doing. You are creating the permission structure for murder. Because you are saying, even though you can't prove the things that you lied about, you lied to me just now and said that Donald Trump didn't listen to the courts, you couldn't prove it, you had to back down, so then you just say, well, he's going to do it. Right? And so what are people to do when you say that? Oh, you have a president that won't listen to the courts. So what you're telling them is the guy's a complete and total authoritarian tyrant. And what do people do to authoritarian tyrants? Oh, they try to kill him. You mean like the 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life? So this is the kind of thing that you're fostering. And I said, Cenk, I know you don't want the president murdered. You didn't want Charlie Kirk murdered. I believe that you're a man of good conscience, but what you're doing is creating the permission structure for these things. And he's like, well, the right does it too. And I said, send me the video of a right-wing person celebrating the murder of somebody on the left. Send me the video, a video. And I started sending him videos of all the people on the left saying all the horrible stuff that they've been saying. Just video after video. I would wait like 20 minutes and send him another video, and 30 minutes and send him another video, and 45 minutes and send him another video. He stopped responding. I sent him a video this morning. The reason I'm telling you this is because I'm just going to tell you my posture has changed. When I came into politics 15 years ago with the Tea Party movement, and you can look this up, there is a front page cover story in the San Francisco Examiner of me in the living room of the founder of MoveOn.org, Joan Blades, and I'm dressed in my normal home clothes, a cowboy hat and a big buckle and a leather vest and my boots, and I've taken 3 of my friends from Grass Valley, California, and I drove to the Berkeley Hills, and we sat down for a conversation with 3 of her liberal friends in Berkeley, California. And that's what we did, and so that was my posture, that was my perspective, is look, we need to just talk. I'm not there anymore. And they've forced me off of that position. I don't want to be off of that position. I want to believe that we live in a world where we can just talk. But we learned something this week, which is we live in a world where just talking can get you killed. Charlie Kirk was killed for 2 things. The first thing he was killed for is the most important thing that he was killed for. Charlie Kirk is a martyr. Charlie Kirk was killed because he loved God, and that was the first thing in his life, and he professed his faith in everything that he did. And you heard him on that video. If he could be remembered for only one thing, it was being a man who was courageous in his faith. And he was killed for that. And we should not forget that. And people are going to say Charlie Kirk was a martyr for free speech. That's true, but it's secondary. Charlie Kirk was a man who lived out his faith every minute of his life, professed his faith openly, and the left and the world at large couldn't handle that. And that's why he's dead. And so what that means to me that we have to do now is we have to live like that. And we have to be willing to profess our faith. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, there should be no place on this earth where you're too shy to say, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And secondarily, Charlie was never shy about speaking his political opinions and his worldview anywhere he went. And so the thing that I think we can do to honor Charlie, my friend, all of our friend, a guy who speaks for all of us, who's speaking more boldly and more broadly in death than he possibly could in life, is to honor him by boldly professing our own faith and boldly speaking the truth about the world as it exists. And that's not easy. I don't want you to think I'm asking you to do something easy. I'm asking you to do something really hard. I'm asking you to mess up your life. For real. Because you're going to hear at work, somebody's going to say, well, I don't know why we just can't leave these transgender kids alone. And, we should just give them the gender-affirming care that they need, and then they'll be better. And you're going to sit there, and your natural tendency is going to be like, I don't want to have the fight. Like, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I'm at work. I don't want to cause any trouble. It might be at the dinner table. Like maybe one of your kids comes home. I hear this from people all the time. I have kids, they're crazy liberals. We just don't talk politics. Really? Now? They're going to come home and they're going to sit at that table across from you and they're going to you just don't understand. We just need to let people be who they are and express their true identities. And why does it even bother you if somebody transitions from being a man to a woman? Why do you care if men are in women's sports? And a lot of parents I know and a lot of grandparents I know are like, I don't want to argue with my kids over this kind of stuff because I'm going to break my family. It's going to hurt my family. And my answer is, if you're not going to tell your kids, who's going to tell your kids? Right? You going to let the world tell your kids the way it's supposed to be? So when I say that, it's not easy. Right? You're going to have friction in your life. You're going to have people who don't like you because you're willing to tell the truth. You're going to be at church and you're going to hear somebody at church say, Jesus Christ loved everybody. He loved the sinners. He wouldn't have any problem with the gay people or the lesbians or the transgenders. And you're going to know, yes, that's correct. Jesus loved everybody, but did he have a problem with homosexuality? Of course he did. Right? Jesus Christ told people, go forth and sin no more. How brutal is that? We're all sinners. We all know that we're going to sin again. Every time we ask for forgiveness of sin, thank God for the unlimited grace of Jesus Christ, because we're going to sin again tomorrow. And yet Jesus said to people, I think the hardest instruction that you find in the Bible, Jesus says to the woman who's accused of prostitution, right? He says to all the Pharisees, let those among you who cast or without sin cast the first stone. And then he says to her afterwards, go forth and sin no more. That's a hard message. It's an impossible message. He said it to her, and we have to be willing to say the hard things in our lives to people, even when it's going to cause us and them pain. You're going to hear people say stuff, and you have to do to them what I did to this woman in the airport. There's one thing that I can guarantee you about that woman in the airport. 100% guarantee. She will never do that again. Right? See, we've allowed this. I've allowed this. All of us have. All of us have heard this kind of stuff maybe from our pastor, maybe from a boss or a coworker or a kid or whomever, somebody at a store, and you're just like, I don't even want to deal with that. We can't do that anymore because they've taught us that if they get control of the narrative, if they get control of the world, if we allow them to do that, then they're going to kill us. They're going to throw us in prison. I learned from the people that I met on the left when I was in the Tea Party movement. I was meeting with all these people. They would act like super nice people, and I realized in the end, yeah, they're nice people. And when they put me in handcuffs and they marched me and my family away to the gulag, those people on the left will be like, man, what a bummer that Mark ended up in the gulag. But he said all that stuff, all that crazy right-wing, conservative, rational, common sense stuff. And so that's why he's in the gulag. If he wasn't that way, he wouldn't be there. So we have an obligation to Charlie, to our Lord and Savior, even more so, to go out and to be vessels for the truth, the gospel truth and the worldly truth. It is impossible for me to put into words how important it is for me personally, it's my selfish desire, to be here with you guys right now. There's nothing I needed more in the world than to be with you guys. Because for me, you guys are the hope of the world. When I see you guys in this world, on this earth, at this point, you guys are what give me hope for the country. And the lights went out, they flickered out for a moment when Charlie was killed, and I've been struggling all week. I've talked to a bunch of people here already, and we try to talk about it, and we choke up. And that's where I've been all week. And I've been telling Patty, I both dread being here and having to talk about it so much, but I need to be here. So I need the energy that all you guys bring to a place like this. I need the heart and the passion. To me, it's a mirror of everything that Charlie Kirk was. And what I hope for you guys over the next couple of days, of course we're going to talk about COS, and of course we're going to talk about all our plans and the things we're going to do and the hopes that we have and the ways that we're going to get this done. But the biggest thing that I hope that you come away with is that you come away with a renewed hope in humanity and a knowledge that there are a whole bunch of people like you out there in the world that are willing to stand for right. Does that sound good? Just trying to make sure we're running on time here. Before we go into the next part of the session, I want to make sure we recognize all the veterans. So if all the veterans in the audience could please stand. I know we got a lot of you guys in the audience. God bless you guys. All right, specifically, anybody who was in the Air Force, please stay standing. Air Force veterans. So I don't know if you guys know, this is the 78th birthday anniversary for the Air Force. So to our Air Force veterans specifically, God bless you guys. So we're really blessed to be here in Indiana. And, you know, we choose where we go carefully, and we like to be in states that are aligned with us and where the government's aligned with us. And it's even better if we have a governor that's aligned with us, right? So for those, how many people here are from Indiana? Raise your hands if you're like, we got a bunch of Indianans in the audience, so thank you guys. Thanks for hosting us. So you guys have a governor that to me is what politician should be, because he's not really a politician. Governor Braun came to office with experience building a nationwide company. So this is a guy who understood before he came to government, like he wasn't one of these guys like he aspired his entire life to be in government. He ran a company, he built wealth, he understands how America works. He understood and, in my opinion, achieved the American dream. His political experience starts where political experience should start, which is he was on a school board. Did you guys know that about your governor? I think that's such a cool thing because he understands the education system from the ground up. And again, I just don't think that's this common. He served in your state legislature 14 through 17. He had a Senate term starting in 2018. I think you guys are incredibly blessed, and we are incredibly blessed to have COS endorser Governor Mike Braun with us tonight.
What a pleasure to be here. I come from a place about 2 hours south of here, and when I'm done, I'm heading that direction. I can tell you when I was a U.S. Senator, I took 420 plane trips out there over 6 years. Any of you would like to do that? Probably not. Everything I like to do was back where I was born and raised. To tell you where I come from, back in the mid to early 70s, I had a big decision to make. 4 classmates and I went to Wabash College. Kind of peculiar then, it was only one of all male schools left. I couldn't believe I did that. And my sweetheart went to IU. That was risky. We made it through those 4 years, got married 4 years later. And then I wanted to be a doctor. I changed. That looked like it was going to be too much post-secondary education. And above and beyond the undergrad degree, ended up coming back to my hometown after I figured out I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Didn't really frame up much of a political point of view, other than I knew where I came from, you believed in faith, family, community, freedom, and opportunity. Pretty good? And I always get asked, well, who are your mentors? And I had to scratch my head. I said, I think my mentors were my parents and my community. How lucky could you have been? And then yes, thank you. Head out east to get an MBA at a place when people heard it the first time, you'd get a few boos, that place called Harvard. Yeah. Well, I was saved. I took the first entrepreneur's course there, gave up the biggest starting salary you could have gotten straight out of business school, took an 81.5% pay cut, because the best job I could find in my hometown was working at the kitchen cabinet company that started in the back room of the lumber company. Blessed to have a community that every business there currently was started in our hometown. And it grew on the back of building furniture out of wood. So, always kind of vaguely interested in politics, liked election night, get the popcorn out and watch it. Didn't really think much about it until I got down the trail. That first business I went to was the only business after the kitchen cabinet job for 3 years. Office was in a used mobile home, run-down facility. I got there 6 months before the farm crisis. Everything they sold was to farmers. It was a baptism by fire in the world of wanting to have your own business. Ended up becoming a used truck and equipment dealer. Had to scramble to do something that was going to keep the doors open. Took 17 years to get out of that trailer. Finally moved into a real warehouse. We still had 20 employees. Between 98 and 08, we grew from 20 employees to 300. And that's when the 08-09 crisis came along. Government's getting big. Everything I sold was into the automotive market. Everything I owned was a piece of commercial real estate. It was called the automotive and commercial real estate crisis. You wonder, did you make the right decision? Well, I tell you what happened. I learned if you do things correctly, like not borrow from the future to live in the present, reinvested every penny, got good at controlling expenses. When all of my regional competitors got bought out by a big fat private equity company who almost went bankrupt doing it, we were healthy. Phone starts ringing off the hook after the business, the market I was in collapsed by 50%. We grew more out of that 4-year stretch because we operated exactly opposite from what the federal government is doing. We were there with a clean balance sheet, all kinds of opportunity in front of us. That little business was then a regional business with about 300 employees, 10 locations. The American dream. Between 09 and 13, we grew to about 30 states and 50 or 60 locations. Now it's got 90 locations in 40 states, a few in Canada, and we never borrowed a penny. Never for growing the business, just like you learn in Finance 101. If you're going to borrow money, make sure it's not to consume, it's to invest. And an investment for me was a warehouse. Use that rule of thumb, and we still do it, and opportunity comes your way. What I just described is the exact opposite of what I did 7 years ago when I went to the U.S. Senate. Number one, I pledged, and you're all going to be believers in this, to not be a senator for more than 2 terms and get your butt back to where you came from. Everyone does it, and they have a quick case of amnesia, and then you're going to end up wheeling them out of there after 2 to 3 decades. So we're going to get to the conversation of what you mean as a convention of states and why it's so important. And I'm going to fill you in on the 6-year tutorial I had there that shouldn't need a tutorial. It should need common sense. We got to replace the career politicians, the farm system politicians, with people that were like our founders. They set the example. They could have done anything they wanted after that experiment. Jefferson and Washington hurried back to the farm, set the example, and look how long it took to actually screw things up. 1913, income tax, Federal Reserve created. We still never believed in borrowing from future generations. Even with the New Deal and the Great Society, the liberal framework, they never thought it was a good idea to borrow from your kids and grandkids. I'm going to let it there, and we're going to talk about that issue and others, and hopefully we'll figure something out in the discussion. Thank you for having me.
I wish every state had a governor like you. We'd be in a lot better shape, Governor. I want to start where I was actually going to finish, but I want to start here, which is you ended up in politics. You're a business guy. It doesn't sound like you weren't a poli-sci major. Why did you get into politics, and what motivated you to do that?
I told you earlier, elections intrigued me. The political world did. I was actually in the Youth for Lugar campaign in '74 at Wabash. So we didn't do much, but I was interested in it. Like I told you earlier, family was always going to be the most important thing. My wife, just so you know, 47 years, only job, her business at 505 Main Street, a home accessory and gift store. And she says she's going 50 years. So she was there doing that. We were blessed with 4 kids, 2 sons and 2 daughters, 3 of whom run the business. So that was the priority. And then, funny story, it was 2004, a guy I knew that was vice president of the school board actually calls for my wife. And he was trying to get her to go onto the school board. We were in a rural township. If you said yes over the phone, you were on the board before the election. So be careful. So I was having fun with it, you know, kind of leaning back on the couch, and was going to crack a joke when she finally said she didn't have enough time to do it, but she caught me by surprise. She said, "Bernie, I've told you politely, I don't have time to be on the school board. Maybe my husband would be interested." I literally wanted to get up, and of course we had a real phone then. She hung up, and I think she said, well, he heard that, because she repeated it. I decided to do it. And school boards, there wasn't CRT, there wasn't masking kids then. It was maybe a budget dust-up or disciplinary issue. Anyone that wants to get into the public arena, you'll find out if you got the temperament to do it, especially in today's world. So it gave me a good grounding on education, which is one of the 2 issues most dear to people, especially when you're young, healthcare as you get older. And ironically, both of them have high demands. Government loves to get involved with it because they can get their tentacles into it, and they compete with one another for which one goes up at the higher rate year after year. So founders never intended, probably, the federal government to be involved in health care.
Right.
They probably thought the states would do a pretty good job at education. Right. And look at how we've evolved. So, school board 10 years, and then I get a call in 14 from Congressman Messmer, who was State Representative Messmer then. Every 2 years you run. He was getting tired of that. He wanted to run for state senator. He called me first. That is where I had to really say, am I interested in taking the next step? because then it cascaded pretty quickly. I said yes, ran in 14, got elected twice, gave up the second year of the second term because I had enough tutorial on being a legislator. Now I was getting concerned about the condition of our national government. And that is when I decided to take the plunge to run for Senate. But it all started with the school board call that came in for my wife.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we should take away from that is, to me, Governor, the best politicians are called. It's not people who grow up thinking, I'm going to be such a great senator. You know, I love myself, so I could picture myself in the Senate or in the House or whatever. You get a calling on your life. Something happens.
Those individuals are called farm system politicians.
Right.
And they are the ones that pivot quickly out of law school into an elected or an appointed office, above average intelligence, don't know anything, and then want to run the biggest business in the world.
Right.
Because they all want to end up there, because even though they say they believe in term limits, most do not honor it. And sadly, if we churned that place with the best and brightest that did something in the real world first, just like the founders did, you'd fix it in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to switch to the topic at hand, which of course is Convention of States. How did you first hear about Convention of States?
Well, do any of you know Senator Tom Coburn from?
Just a little bit.
So this is funny because I'm going to bring up another word or phrase like Harvard, Morning Joe. Yeah, I know, it almost knocks you off your seat. Well, when that show started, you know who was on it most often? Dr. Tom Coburn.
Right.
Because that was actually supposed to be MSNBC's conservative show.
Right.
So I watched that and I said, that's the only senator I've ever heard talking about a balanced budget and don't borrow money from future generations. And that would have been back in the early 2000s, because I think he got out of the Senate in 2011. But when he heard I was running for Senate, started with 1% in the first poll. My wife asked, where are you at, dear, in the polls? I said, we rounded up to 1, but we're going to win it. We're going to win it. And so many things started to come into play. He wanted to come into my race and came to Indiana twice. And then he trained the smartest lady in D.C., feisty conservative that knows all the rules. Her name's Katie Bailey.
Oh, she's great.
And Katie was my legislative director. And that's how, as a senator, in the third year, we got more legislation passed that was practical, that was trying to shrink government. And if it had a fiscal, we found a way to pay for it. We got so good at it that Democrats would bring practical ideas. That was few and far between. And then on the Senate side, you only had like a Joe Manchin and a Kirsten Sinema that would have even been real considered in that. Now they're gone. So that is who inspired me to kind of, and that's who I looked up to. Because
Another hat tip to our patron saint.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Tom Coburn.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a remedy, Article 5 and calling a convention of states. Most people don't even know about it still, which is my great frustration and the great opportunity. Why did you decide that this is something that you wanted to support?
So I had to get good in making ends meet. I told you the story earlier. And when you've got the printing press in the basement, which is what the federal government has,
right.
They exercise discipline from 1913 until, and I'm going to give you some real quick progression of how much it cascaded. I think we were roughly about $1 trillion in debt when Ronald Reagan got there, give or take. Was disappointed when Reagan cut taxes and didn't look at spending.
Right.
It was so small, relatively speaking, even conservatives probably thought that was innocuous. Kind of set the stage to where we just never turned to the spending side of the ledger. And then between 1980 and 2000, when W got in there, we were about $5 trillion in debt. That's starting to cascade, go from $1 trillion in 80, $5 trillion in 2000. He put 2 wars on the credit card, mostly, and we're probably running $300 to $300 billion deficits. So when he's done, we are $10 trillion in debt. Well, you have a community organizer coming along next. If they're doing that on defense, we're going to do it on the domestic side. And the whole 08-09 dust-up, TARP, was only $900 billion, only. I thought that was atrocious.
Right.
But then the CARES Act was $4 trillion. So we were $16 trillion in debt when I got there in 18, with structural trillion-dollar deficits. The rest is, you know the arithmetic, and I don't want to depress you thoroughly, about the numbers, because they are that severe. Right now, the solution, along with Article 5, which has prominence in the Constitution, it is Article 5. But no, it's never been used. Congress has been the only pathway to amendments, but they have zero interest in actually reining it in fiscally. And when your interest is now equal to your defense budget, and it gets geometrically worse each year we go forward, the whole process of a Chapter 11, which is what a business goes through when they got a year or two to work it out, that will come into play, and that's when the convention is going to really, I think, catch stride.
Right.
And that's only 6 to 7 years down the road, because right now we're on a pathway to be $60 trillion in debt in 10 years. The Medicare Trust Fund goes broke in about 4, Social Security in 8, then things really start to wobble. Our reserve currency status, all the things that we've had. And I want to tell you too, the greatest generation that grew up in the Depression believed in hard work, investing, not consuming and spending, living in the present, off the future. They fought World War II, grew up in the Depression, paid off the highest debt we ever had before, and built the interstate highway system. That's not in our marrow anymore. That's not in our bloodstream. So it's going to take something to shake the system into reality, and it's not going to be from farm system politicians, career politicians.
So I'm going to close with this question because we just got a few minutes left. Do you think there's any chance the federal government will ever fix itself without a crisis and a convention of states? I know softball.
Was
but...
that a joke? I took as a privileged motion, Rand Paul was the only one that would do it before, as a privileged motion to the floor on a balanced budget. That's the one thing, again, lip service. 17 Republicans voted against it. Your neocons and your appropriators are the ones that make the unholy alliance with all the Democrats. And as long as they're doing it, it will be hard to slow it down until the numbers crunch in such a way, because when the Medicare Trust Fund goes broke in 4 years, they'll borrow the money to backfill into the budget, right, so that they don't have to cut the benefits. The Social Security Fund will be a bigger one that goes broke 4 years later. We'll be able to see what they do, but raise taxes? Well, I mean, the economy has never been able to pay more than about 18% of our GDP into the federal coffers. Right. The invisible hand of the marketplace doesn't allow it to happen. So we've accepted, up until Biden, running about 5%, deficits that were going to be in that 500 billion range. Then they went to $1 trillion, and now we're stuck with $2 trillion. So who knows?
Yeah. All right, so that was a softball, so I'm going to give you one more.
Okay.
Favorite amendments, things that you think need to come out of a convention?
It's clear, a lot of people are afraid a convention could run away. That's mostly foolishness. Confine it to 2 things: term limits and a balanced budget amendment. The founders would have never imagined that you needed to put that in other than Article 5. I don't know that they ever thought it would be due to financial irresponsibility, but they never imagined the printing press being in the basement. And that is a dangerous combination with career politicians that get a better pension every term they get reelected, and it's sad the perverse incentives that make you do more of it rather than just say, hey, I gave it 2 terms in the Senate or 6 terms in the House. If you love it so much, 18 years max, get your butt back home. We won't get it until it's a calamity or we do it through a convention of states. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mike Braun.
Thank you. God bless you, Governor.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
For those of you who live here in Indiana, man, you're lucky. There's a lot of states could use a Mike Braun, that's for sure. We appreciate him coming here, being with us. You know, he's got an incredibly busy schedule. For the fact that he's willing to jam in here, do what he did, talk to you guys a little bit, and then head home to his family. We really appreciate that. How about another round for Mike Braun? Okay, so we're going to let